George IV had huge appetites for luxury living, music, horses, the arts, and women. To indulge his whims, he built a pleasure palace by the sea, the Royal Pavilion, Brighton. While the exterior was inspired by Indo-Gothic architecture, the interior was an homage to the exotic Chinese style. The building cost, in today's money, is said to be £502,000, 797, 6 shillings and 10 pennies. It took 36 years to complete, by which time, ironically, he was too old to enjoy it. To get to the Royal Pavilion, take any of the buses going down North Street, until you reach the palace's Indian Gate. Entry is available all year round. For opening times, check out the Brighton and Hove Museum's website. The future George IV, then Prince of Wales, first visited Brighton in 1783 as a guest of his equally fun-loving uncle, Henry, Duke of Cumberland. Though just 21 at the time, George was advised by his doctor that the sea air and fresh water would help with his developing gout. Though charming with a keen sense of fashion, George was known to be extravagant, dissolute, and vain. The prince's father, known unkindly as Mad King George III, despaired of his son's unacceptable behaviour. So, Brighton was the perfect place to escape disapproval and wagging tongues. This is a reputation that the city enjoys to this day. The building is entered through this grand space supported by columns. From the outset, and while progressing through the building, you'll appreciate the fine attention to detail. George's guests first entered through the octagonal hall. This led to the entrance hall. These rooms were decorated in a sedate, understated way. This was done in order to wow the visitors as they moved into the more lavish rooms. This is the long gallery. In this ornately decorated room are furnishings mixed with real and imitation bamboo, stained glass windows, Chinese figurines and vases, gilt mirrors, oak cabinets, and exquisite chandeliers. The lighting in this part of the house has been deliberately dimmed to protect the 19th century treasures. The figurines along this corridor are of Chinese court officials and are made of unfired clay. They were made in China and date from the Jia Qing period, 1796 to 1820. These particular figurines are very similar to the ones which would have been included in the original scheme for this room. 8 of the figurines have been lent by His Majesty the King. The Chinese theme continues throughout the building. It's said that George liked to see himself as a Chinese emperor, and these figurines with their nodding heads as his willing courtiers. The gallery would have been used by the prince and his friends for playing cards, having casual conversation, and enjoying musical entertainment. In this gallery can be seen the Drummer Boy clock. This particular clock dates from 1880, but it is similar to the one that was made for the Prince Regent's Chinese drawing room in Carlton House, London. That clock was brought to the Pavilion in 1819. Guests would pass through the double cast iron staircase to the banqueting room. This incredible room certainly has the wow factor and is one of the most beautifully decorated rooms in the palace. The decor was created by the designer Robert Jones, who began working for Prince George when he was regent in 1815. Due to King George III's mental decline, despite reservations from people at court and in government, the party prince reigned as regent for 9 years prior to his coronation in 1820. The centerpiece in this incredible room filled with treasures is probably the main chandelier, 9 meters high and weighing 1 ton. It's held fast by the claws of a silver dragon. What a glittering sight this room must have been by candlelight. On both sides of the room are 4 pedestal lamps. They are made of blue spode china and are decorated with dragons with gilt brass mounts. Prince George loved to entertain, and clearly there was a wealth of visual stimulants for his guests to enjoy. Just in case anyone forgot, the coronets above the door are a not too subtle hint to who lived there. I really like this Chinese tower embedded in this door. Of course, to serve the king and his friends, an army of servants were needed. The decker's room were where prepared dishes were laid. During very grand banquets, up to 60 dishes were served. Between the decker's room and the great kitchen was the servants' corridor. This would have been a hive of activity, with people running backwards and forwards for hours on end. This corridor, of course, led to the great kitchen, which in its day was state of the art, with its high ceilings and copper canopies, which drew heat, smells and steam out to the kitchen. The copperware on display here is similar to what would have been used in the pavilion during the Regency era. The cast iron columns you can see here support the ceiling. They're disguised as palm trees, which is in keeping with the exotic theme that runs throughout the palace. The mechanical spit was used to roast meats and poultry. From the kitchen, we walk back to the Decker's room in order to get to the east side of the banqueting room. After dinner, guests would leave this area, walk through the ceiling height doors into the banqueting room gallery. Typically, this room was used for card playing and sipping liqueurs. Sometimes the carpets were rolled up and floors were chalked for dancing. The furniture here is known as the Dolphin Suite. It has maritime motifs. The furniture is also meant to commemorate Lord Nelson's naval victories. This room was known as the Saloon. The saloon was usually at the centre of a grand building, 2 stories high, with windows overlooking a garden. This saloon forms part of a suite of rooms designed for the Prince of Wales by Henry Holland in 1787. This room is unique amongst all the others in Brighton Pavilion, for it has never changed its shape or location, and its height has never been compromised throughout all the changes that has taken place throughout the years. The walls are decorated in a leaf and flower pattern. The circular carpet is decorated with a sunflower and stars. It has a border of dragons, flowers and stars. Just look at the lush red and gold curtains and the fine detailing on the ceiling. One of George's great passions was music. He didn't just have a music room, but this music room gallery. It's quite refined and understated. There is of course a grand piano in this room, and perhaps other musical instruments were on display here. Despite his reported vices, George had a cultured side. He enjoyed singing, he played the cello and the piano. He was also known to employ a small orchestra from time to time, at great expense. This room was designed by Frederick Crace. On the mantelpiece above the fire is the rock clock. It's an excellent replica of the clock that stood here. The carpet in this room is also a replica. It was created by using surviving fragments, documents, illustrations and samples of what lay there before.
Which were made in Holland and imported into this country. We've got the accounts of them, thousands of them were installed in this building. And they're behind all the main rooms. Originally, they formed a sort of seamless...
As George got older and more obese, he couldn't walk up the stairs. Instead, a bedroom was made for him on the ground floor. He was attended to by loyal servants such as John Whiting. There was a mechanism that could be lowered or raised to get him in and out of bed. On the right, you may be able to see a hidden door. This led to the king's water closet, as well as stairs leading to the bedroom of the king's last mistress, Elizabeth, the Marchioness of Cunningham. As we turn our back to the bed, in the far corner of the room, there is another hidden door. This held the king's plunge bath. It was lined with marble and filled with 6,000 gallons of heated seawater. The Marchioness wasn't the only lady to enjoy the king's favour. His great love had been Maria Fitzherbert. 6 years older than George, she met him in the spring of 1784 when he was 21 years old. She was seen as unsuitable as a future queen, for not only had she been married and widowed twice, she was a Catholic. Definite echoes of Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson here. Despite general disapproval, George went ahead and married Maria in secret at her London home in December 1785. Secrecy was necessary because not only did George not get the permission of his father, as required by the Royal Marriages Act, marrying a Catholic back then would have made him lose his place in the line of succession. Their marriage, however, did not end happily. Due to George's profligacy, he had run up debts of £600,000. That's the equivalent of 87 million in 2023. The prince's father, King George III, only agreed to erase this debt if George married a suitable woman. The faithless prince did as he was bid and married Caroline, Duchess of Brunswick, his first cousin, in 1795. George's royal duty was completed with the birth of their daughter, Princess Charlotte of Wales, in 1796. Unfortunately, the marriage was tempestuous. Love did not blossom, and within 10 years, rumours spread that, like her husband, Caroline had taken multiple lovers and had possibly borne another man's child. Caroline moved to Italy in 1814. 3 years later, she was grief-stricken to hear that her only daughter, Charlotte, had died in childbirth. 3 years after that, when George finally ascended to the throne in January 1820, Caroline returned to England to assert her rights as Queen Consort. The British people were hugely supportive of Caroline and disgusted with the new king for his reckless, profligate behaviour. The royal scandal worsened with George barring Caroline from his coronation. She died broken-hearted 3 weeks later. Her body was taken to Brunswick, Germany, for burial. These stairs lead to the North Gallery. When George was younger and more agile, he and his brothers used these rooms. Here we have the entrance to George IV's brothers' bedrooms. These are known as the Yellow Bow Rooms. In the 20th century, Robert Jones's original decorative schemes were recreated. The bed and window curtains were recreated using documents from the Regency era. This is an anteroom between the two bedrooms. And this anteroom leads back into the gallery. Here we have what is known as Victoria's Gallery. After the death of her uncles, George IV and William IV, Victoria ascended to the throne in 1837 at the tender age of 18. These rooms, which now contain an exhibition, would have been her private apartments. We'll now visit Victoria's bedroom. It has been said that Victoria didn't like Brighton Pavilion. That's not quite true. She found the town itself crowded and noisy, and when she started having children of her own, very cramped. She and Prince Albert chose instead to build a seaside home at Osborne on the Isle of Wight. Click the link to see my video of Osborne House.
Interiors, and indeed she had them removed, and they are at Buckingham.
fine detail of Victoria's bedroom furniture and wallpaper has lovingly been recreated here. As we leave Victoria's bedroom, we head to the South Gallery, where the King or Queen's guests breakfasted. Off the South Gallery are rooms that were frequented by William IV. They're known today as William IV's rooms. Inevitably, with every grand house, there has to be a gift shop. And here are the gardens. I wish I'd spent longer because I could have seen so much more. Leaving the Royal
Pavilion, I wanted to see something of modern Brighton.
Pavilion, I wanted to see something of modern Brighton. I wanted to see something of modern Brighton. But this part of Brighton has a hint of the Regency era for me, with the narrow avenues and cobbled streets. And of course, I had to visit the seafront before nightfall. This isn't quite the scene that George IV would have seen in the late 18th century and early 19th century. But the rugged beauty of the sea and the pebbles on the beach remain the same.